Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fellows YouTube channel. My name is Tyler Plath, and we're going to talk this week's waiver ads. And as we are now going into the 5th week of the regular season, we have to shift our attention a bit when it comes to these waiver ads. The odds that we find players that will immediately produce on our fantasy teams are pretty slim because most of those guys, if not all of those guys, got scooped up within the first 4 weeks. Now, you'll still be able to add and drop based on who's hot and cold, based on bye weeks, because this is the first bye week that we have, or just the latest injuries, stuff like that. But we also need to start identifying players who could become relevant producers down the road, and that's where we step in to help you out. So before I begin, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you have that notification bell turned on as well to be notified whenever videos like this are posted on Mondays, but also whenever else we post on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays as well to help you build the best fantasy team possible to win your league. So without further ado, in no particular order, the first player we'll discuss is Bengals wide receiver Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins suffered a rib fracture on Sunday, and that'll keep him off the field for a little bit. It's still to be determined exactly how long it'll be, but a broken rib as a receiver has got to be painful, going over the middle, getting hit, all the sorts. Tyler Boyd now takes over that wide receiver 2 role, and in 2 games without T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd has put up 13 catches on 17 targets for 154 yards and a touchdown. So it's essentially 13 fantasy points a game, and if he scores, it's then 19 fantasy points a game. This Bengals offense is still trying to figure things out, but because of the bigger role and because of the previous success in this role, Tyler Boyd is worth adding. Now on to Michael Wilson, who was one of my favorite later round wide receivers in the draft. I had him graded as a 4th round wide receiver. That's why I call him a later round, even though he wasn't a later round. He was taken in the 3rd round by the Arizona Cardinals because Arizona got the sense that Michael Wilson was a favorite for a lot of other people, myself included. But a lot of people who get paid a lot more than me and are a lot smarter than me. So they took him in the 3rd round. They envision him as a solid contributor. With that kind of draft capital, they have a picture in their mind of Michael Wilson being a contributor on their team. But we got a taste of it this past week against San Francisco, where he went for 7 catches, 76 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, he's not going to overtake Marquise Brown as the wide receiver 1 in the offense, but he figures to be the wide receiver 2 at the end of the year. I mean, at this point, through 4 weeks of the regular season, he has ran more routes than Rondale Moore. So with that kind of opportunity, right, where he's seeing the field as much as he is, running as many routes as he is, it's really only a matter of time until we see more, consistent fantasy production, because this was really the first week where, again, 7 catches, 76 yards, that's 14 points in PPR, plus 2 scores, that's 28 fantasy points. You're not going to see that every week. But if we're seeing 9, 10, 11 fantasy points a week from the guy, that's at least worth stashing away on your bench. So I understand not adding him at the moment, just, again, because he's an Arizona Cardinal, all that kind of stuff. But at least put him on your radar, because he's eventually going to work his way into relevant production on this Arizona team. Now it's time we talk about Marvin Mims, and Mims has been a fairly popular topic over the last couple weeks, and now is probably the time to add him before it's too late. Going into week 3, the big conversation about Mims was the fact that he was 8th on his team in routes ran. He was behind Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, but he was even behind guys like Brandon Johnson, Little Jordan Humphrey. He was behind both Jameson Williams and Samaje Perine, and even Adam Troutman. But after week 4, Marvin Mims leads the Denver Broncos in receiving yards. And doing that just based on the limited snaps and touches, it would be incredibly stubborn of Sean Payton to not give more opportunities to Marvin Mims. Again, based on how efficient he's been just on limited snaps and touches. So, in my opinion, the dam has to break soon, where when he sees the field, we're gonna see a lot of production from the guy. So now is probably the time to add him, because when Marvin Mims, I feel like it's a matter of when, not if, when Marvin Mims sees more of the field, he's going to produce much, much more. So now, like I said, now is probably the time to add him before it's too late. After getting his suspension reduced, Jameson Williams might be worth the look, and I never thought I'd say that, but here we are. Detroit is just beginning to hit their stride, and the one thing, in my opinion, that they're missing in the offense is someone to just take the top off the defense. Yes, they've used Khalif Raymond in that role. Sam Laporta has been used downfield every now and then, but they need a consistent deep threat that can push the safeties back, open up the short game for Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's Jameson Williams for you. So I will be transparent. I've been on record saying that Josh Reynolds is likely the wide receiver 2 moving forward in this offense, and with Sam Laporta's performance so far, Jameson Williams might be the 4th pass-catching option. And if Detroit likes Jahmyr Gibbs more than Jameson Williams, he may be the 5th pass-catching option. But there's still a chance, a very small chance, but still a chance that Jameson Williams emerges. And because of that, he's worth looking at. Not saying it's a guarantee, but there are chances of Jameson Williams coming back and just, becoming a relevant fantasy asset. So because of that, he's worth the look. Now, full transparency, yet again, this is going to be live before Monday Night Football. So the analysis on Zach Charbonnet will be based on the first 3 weeks. But the snap counts between Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet through the first 3 weeks are pretty interesting. Week 1, Ken Walker had 30 to Charbonnet's 11. Week 2, Walker had 41 to Charbonnet's 19. Week 3, Walker had 35 to Charbonnet's 31. And their routes ran. Charbonnet overtook Walker in week 3, 16 to 10. So Walker's snaps have stayed relatively the same, and I expect that to continue. But the increase for Charbonnet and the routes ran bode well for him moving forward. And it's something to watch for on Monday Night Football to see, do we see Charbonnet get more snaps than Ken Walker? I doubt that happens, but if we see something like what we saw in week 3, where it's a 35 to 31, but Charbonnet is getting more routes than Ken Walker, why wouldn't you go at Zach Charbonnet? The Seahawks do go on bye in week 5, so depending on how Monday Night Football plays, where if we see Zach Charbonnet dominate, it may be worth going and adding him despite the bye week, but I would err on the side of caution and say you can probably wait until the waiver period passes to not waste a claim on Charbonnet. So again, I'm not recommending you wasting your claim on a bye week, but depending on the performance of Charbonnet on Monday Night Football, you might have to do it. Next, we'll talk about Samaje Perine and Jaleel McLaughlin, both running backs for the Denver Broncos. And Javonte Williams suffered a hip flexor against the Bears. And Adam Schefter reported the same night that Javonte's not going to miss much, if any, time. But if Javonte does miss next week, the 2 guys to go look for are Samaje Perine and Jaleel McLaughlin. And in the time without Javonte, according to JJ Zechariason and Next Gen Stats, Jaleel McLaughlin had a 71% success rate on 6 fewer snaps than Samaje Perine, who had a 33% success rate. I'm still of the assumption that Perine will take the lead duties, but if he's not available in your leagues, I don't think Jaleel McLaughlin is that bad of an option to look at, especially when McLaughlin has, on the limited touches that he has had in this season so far, he looks the more explosive player. He seems like he has the higher ceiling, higher upside, probably in 1 week than Samaje Perine. So again, you probably don't have to waste your claim on McLaughlin, because I think a lot of people will say, well, Samaje Perine is next up and he'll probably take all the carries and whatnot. So you probably don't have to waste your claim on McLaughlin. But if you can, stash McLaughlin. He might be a nice little stash this week on the chance that Javonte misses week 5. It's to be determined if it is worth playing Jaleel McLaughlin because, again, Javonte status, etc., etc. But stash him away just in case. Another rookie wide receiver we're going to discuss here is Bucs wide receiver Trey Palmer, who could be seeing an increased role in the Tampa offense depending on the severity of Mike Evans' hamstring injury. And I would not be surprised as I'm recording this on Monday morning that as soon as I'm finished recording that an update is going to come out about Mike Evans. But the Bucs are going on bye in week 5, so you don't need to waste a claim on Palmer. But Palmer is at least worth keeping tabs on if Mike Evans' hamstring injury is worse than anticipated or gives him the week-to-week label. If you're not so sure on Palmer, right, because you're just not familiar with the name, all that kind of stuff, the other Bucs wide receiver to watch or look for is Devin Tompkins, who did find the end zone against the Saints. But both of those guys are fairly dependent on Mike Evans' status, and Evans was seen on the sideline stretching during the New Orleans game, so more than likely a mild strain, something that he can get better over the course of a bye week. But it's still something to keep tabs on because, again, if it's worse than anticipated, Trey Palmer, Devin Tompkins are the next guys up. Hey, CJ Stroud has been playing out of his mind so far this year, and it's time that you add him to your rosters. He's averaging 21 fantasy points a game over the last 3 weeks. 21 fantasy points. And in a year where we have quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott even, who are just not producing for whatever reason, right? They're injured like Joe Burrow is, or they're not throwing the ball downfield enough like Dak Prescott, who threw 24 of his 34 attempts within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, or is just having different kinds of, schematic and systematic problems like Trevor Lawrence. You need to find a quarterback that can produce until they do, and CJ Stroud is your guy. I mean, again, 21 fantasy points a game. This offense is a lot better. He has been playing out of his mind. CJ Stroud, if you need a replacement, if you need some kind of quarterback production, CJ Stroud is the guy to target and is the guy to go get. As I mentioned with the Seahawks and the Bucs, the Chargers and the Browns are also on bye this week, so here is a quarterback streaming option if you've got a Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, Geno Smith, one of those quarterbacks, and a tight end stream to help you get through the bye week. CJ Stroud can act as a streaming option, but if you're not sold on a Texans quarterback, even though you should be, if you're not, I present to you Jared Goff. This is solely because they are at home against Carolina, and when Jared Goff plays at home, he averages 21 and a half fantasy points per game going back to last year. Carolina plays a ton of zone coverage, and Detroit wide receivers are amongst the highest in scoring against zone coverage. And as the distributor, Jared Goff benefits from this, which is why he's the quarterback stream for us this week. And the tight end stream this week is Zach Ertz against the Bengals. Zach Ertz showed that his week 3 performance against Dallas was a fluke, mainly because Arizona was playing from ahead, so they didn't really need to force the ball downfield. But in the 3 other games, we've seen Zach Ertz put up 8 targets in 2 games with 10 targets. The Bengals are allowing an average of 17 fantasy points a game to the tight end position. 17. That's top 5. I will err on the side of top 5. Could very well be top 3. And that's one of the highest in the league. In terms of just points allowed, points against, Cincinnati gives up points like the Wahoo against tight ends. So this is a great matchup for Zach Ertz. And even if you have a tight end that isn't producing, that isn't on bye, I'd recommend going and getting Zach Ertz. Maybe the best way to say it is this. I know Kyle Pitts is Kyle Pitts, just name value, but if you need another tight end option, Zach Ertz is the guy for you. All right, that'll do it for our Week 5 waiver wire ads, and the players we discussed were Tyler Boyd, Michael Wilson, Marvin Mims, Jameson Williams, Zach Charbonnet, Samaje Perine, Jaleel McLaughlin, Trey Palmer, CJ Stroud, Jared Goff, and Zach Ertz. Thanks for tuning in. A reminder to hit subscribe, give this video a like, and drop any other waiver questions you may have in the comments. We'll be there answering, and go ahead and answer other people's questions as well. We're a community, all trying to get better, all trying to help each other out, build the best teams possible. So go ahead, help each other out in the comments as well, but we will be there also answering any other questions that you've got. So we will see you tomorrow on an episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast, where we discuss the biggest takeaways from week 4 and what they mean for fantasy. And then Cam will be back on Wednesday presenting the latest edition of Buy Low, Sell High. You don't want to miss that. So again, make sure you're subscribed, have that notification bell turned on. So until then, deuces.